On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we have Mr. Curtis Franklin and Mr. Brian Chee here today. Now, we all read articles on the web, right? Especially those enterprise tech ones. Now, the question is, are a large number of contributed articles actually being written by advertisers? Well, we're going to have a nice discussion about that one. Now, do you and your organizations work with databases and backends? I bet you're running into issues like scaling, right? Well, today we have Mr. Sam Lambert. He's Chief Product Officer at PlanetScale. And he's going to talk to us about the current state of the database industry and even give your organization a way to tackle some of those common problems. You definitely should miss it. It's Wyatt on the set.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 450, recorded July 2nd, 2021, Serverless Databases. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by IT Pro TV. CompTIA A+ is the key to your IT career, and as the official video training partner for CompTIA, IT Pro TV will help you get certified. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription when you use code Enterprise30 at checkout. And by Melissa. With the world starting to reopen, you want to make sure your customers' data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. And by Worldwide Technology and Intel. With an innovative culture, thousands of IT engineers, application developers, unmatched labs, and integration centers for testing and deploying technology at scale, WWT helps customers bridge the gap between strategy and execution. To learn more about WWT, visit wwt.com/twit. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big, giant world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals, the experts in their field, starting with the very own enterprise and security expert. He is also a senior analyst at Omdia, and he's our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, how are you doing, my friend?
Lou, I am doing great. How are you, my friend? It's an amazingly wide shot of my office right now because I just had to reconnect from my previous internet connection, but doing well, getting ready for Black Hat, getting ready for the Omdia Analyst Summit, which is part of the virtual preliminaries to Black Hat this year. I'm going to be in person in Las Vegas. I've already made my airline reservations and my hotel reservations. I'm going to be at Black Hat and DEF CON, and just found out that in September, for all of our listeners who are public service and first responder type folks, IWCE, the Conference on Emergency Communications, I'm going to be a speaker there as well. So the fall is beginning to shape up. Can't wait to get out and meet the TWiT, Riot, and everyone else this fall.
Fantastic. Very busy week, very busy month. We'll look forward to the coverage of Black Hat for sure. Well, speaking of busy, we also have our expert in network and security, and he's our all around tech geek as well, Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, how are you doing, my friend? What's keeping you busy?
Actually, I'm slowly unpacking, and that's going to sound like a broken record, but I was actually able to unbury some of my IoT gear. So I've been a big fan of Seed Networks, Seed Laboratories, spelled SEEED Laboratories. They're out of Taiwan. They have this teeny tiny little IoT platform called the WIO, W-I-O. Now, while it is drag and drop, and lots of folks kind of snub them because it's so simple, it's designed for kids and so forth, it's actually a really nice platform. because you can go and link it to all kinds of things. I happen to like linking it to Node-RED or Node.js, and we can do all kinds of really cool things. And, IoT is a lot of fun, and one can keep going.
Indeed, indeed. Well, speaking of a lot of fun, we have a lot of fun planned for today. We not only are going to talk about some articles on the web because, especially tech articles and enterprise ones because, we read a lot of those, right? And the question is, have a large number of those, contributed articles actually, were they written by advertisers? Well, we're going to talk about that and have a nice discussion of it. But also, do your organizations work with databases and backend? I bet you run into issues like scaling, right? Well, today we have Mr. Sam Lambert. He's Chief Product Officer at PlanetScale, and he's going to talk about the current state of the database industry, and he can give us, our organizations, some ways to tackle some of those common problems. Shouldn't miss it. But first, like we always do, let's go ahead and jump into this week's news blips. As if chip makers weren't in enough trouble trying to keep up with manufacturing demands during the pandemic, Broadcom found a way to be in trouble on another front. That's right, the FTC has it out for the supplier. Now, the Federal Trade Commission accused Broadcom of illegally monopolizing the market for the semiconductor components that they sell. Now, Broadcom shares were down about 2% because of the news. Now, the commission voted unanimously to file charges against the company, with newly appointed chair Lina Khan not participating in that vote. Now, at the same time, the commission voted to accept a proposed consent order signed by Broadcom for public comment. The proposed agreement would prohibit Broadcom from entering in some exclusivity deals or loyalty contracts with certain customers and require the company not to condition access to chips on exclusivity or loyalty deals. Now, it would also prohibit Broadcom from retaliating against customers that deal with other competitors. Now, the FTC called out in its complaint that Broadcom has used the exclusive deals to illegally monopolize markets for computer chip components known as semiconductors, and that deliver television and broadband internet. Now, Broadcom settled with the European Commission in October 2020 as antitrust regulators in the region similarly took issue with exclusivity deals. Now, under the deal, Broadcom agreed to suspend such exclusivity agreements and comply with the agreement for 7 years. Now, the FTC said in a release that Broadcom is one of the few significant suppliers of 5 related types of chips. The commission called out that Broadcom illegally maintained monopoly power through long-term agreements with at least 10 original equipment manufacturers that make set-top boxes and broadband devices. Now, the agreements prevented those OEMs from buying chips from Broadcom's rivals. Now, the FTC called out that Broadcom made similar deals with major service providers as well. Now, the FTC's complaint reflects the commission's commitment to enforcing the antitrust laws against monopolists, including in high technology industries. This might just be the straw that breaks the camel's back when it comes to device shortages. We'll see as the September approaches and see what devices and makers actually release in the third quarter.
Well, a new tool at GitHub may speed software development, but it comes with some significant caution. Machine Agent, designed to help developers quickly create blocks of code based on a few semantic hints, is expected to cut programming time significantly, but it also comes with a warning to watch out for errors and security issues. The technical preview, dubbed Copilot, was trained on billions of lines of code from projects on GitHub's development service to predict the intent of a function based on comments, documentation strings, the name of the function, and any code entered by the developer. A collaboration between GitHub and OpenAI, Copilot will autocomplete entire blocks of code, but the groups warn that code could have defects, contain offensive language, and potentially have security issues. Think of the autocomplete function on your smartphone on steroids. Quote, there's a lot of public code in the world with insecure coding patterns, bugs, or references to outdated APIs or idioms, end quote, GitHub stated on its Copilot site. They also noted that when GitHub Copilot synthesizes code suggestions based on this data, it can also synthesize code that contains these undesirable patterns. Copilot is based on the OpenAI Codex, a new generative learning system that's been trained on the English language as well as source code from public repositories like, GitHub. Typing in a comment, a function name, and variables will lead to Copilot auto-completing the body of the function with the most likely result, but the system will also offer other possible code blocks. Insecure code, as it turns out, isn't the only worry. Personal data inadvertently published to GitHub site could be included in the output of the code, although the company found such instances, quote, extremely rare, end quote, in the initial testing of the system.
So I'm calling this article from Dark Reading the stinky phish article, because in research from Barracuda, apparently they're saying the typical phishing email remains in user inboxes for over 3 days before they're removed. Well, hey, even though a lot of malicious emails do get blocked, quite a few actually stick around to molder and smolder in your inbox. Enterprise organizations, on average, take more than 3 days to discover and remove phishing emails that passed their security defenses and landed in employee inboxes. Contributing to delay is a combination of factors, including a lack of investigative tools, security resources, and employee awareness. So Barracuda Network recently analyzed data gathered from some 3,500 organizations in a bid to better understand what happens after a phishing email ends up on a user system. The analysis shows an average organization with around 1,100 employees experienced around 15 incidents per month where phishing email got past their malware and email filtering tools. An average of 10 employees were impacted in each of these incidents. Oh, my goodness. I guess that means I shouldn't clean out my inbox anymore, huh?
Now, Google's plan to revamp web advertising and user tracking by dropping third-party cookie support in Chrome has been delayed. That's right. Most browsers block third-party tracking cookies now, but Google, the world's largest advertising company, wasn't going to follow suit without protecting its business model first. That's right. The company's replacement plan for cookies is a controversial system called FLoC, F-L-O-C. But after many big internet players came out against the idea and the EU launched an antitrust investigation, Google now is saying that, it's become clear that more time is needed across this ecosystem to get this right. New timeline pushes back the death of third-party cookies by about a year and a half. More time needed, indeed. Now, how about maybe never? I don't know. A replacement tracking system called FLoC, or Federated Learning of Cohorts, was the primary alternative floated by Chrome team. Instead of letting individual companies hide a third-party cookie on your computer that tracks the websites you visit for ad interesting tracking, FLoC would let Chrome build an ad profile locally on your computer and ship that profile to advertisers whenever they ask for it. Google says this plan is better than third-party cookies because it will take individual identification out of the ad tracking process by combining people into groups, though many opponents of the idea have disputed the idea. Now, FLoC is Google's primary pitch for user tracking and cookie replacement. It's not the only plan, though. The company says that, quote, Chrome and others have offered more than 30 proposals, and 4 of those proposals are available in origin trials. Now, Google is committed to public development and tested periods with, quote, stage 1. The completion of testing and the launch of user tracking API is happening in late 2022. Now, stage 1 will last for 9 months, giving publishers and advertisers industry time to migrate to their services. Now, stage 2 starts in mid-2023 when Chrome will phase out support for third-party cookies over a 3-month period. Again, not tracking users at all, which is the stance other browsers have taken, does not seem to be on the table here for Google. Now, most of the internet citizens have already had it with tracking cookies and scary personal data relating to them in ads. If forced upon people, for sure, Firefox better gear up their engineering team because people will drop Chrome like it's hot. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, we have the News Bites. But before we get to the News Bites, we do have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's IT Pro TV. Now, if you're trying to build a career in IT, you need to be CompTIA A+ certified. It will expand your horizons, whether it's location, pay, or even your employer. Now, lucky for you, IT Pro TV is the official video training partner for CompTIA, so not only will you get the search you need, you'll enjoy the learning along the way. Now, IT Pro TV is the best online source for IT education, whether you're an organization or an individual interested in starting and expanding your IT skills. Now, their edutainers make learning IT actually interesting and fun. Guess what? July is a great month at IT Pro TV because it's CompTIA month. Now, IT Pro TV will be featuring 2 CompTIA-themed webinars. The Tech Native podcast with Don Pezzett. He will be welcoming 2 CompTIA guests. And throughout the month of July, they'll be giving away CompTIA exam vouchers. Now, on Friday, July 30 at 2 p.m., IT Pro TV will be playing CompTIA Jeopardy live. You don't want to miss it. Now, IT Pro TV's 7 studios and over 5,800 hours of IT training creates the perfect environment for you to learn IT, and they are always adding new content. Go further and get certified in Apple, security skills, Python, Cisco, and much, much more. Now, IT Pro TV also makes it so easy to get a good IT education because you can do it anytime from the comfort of your own home on your own schedule. Now, IT Pro TV's courses are live and on demand worldwide via Chromecast, Roku, Apple TV, PC, or their iOS or Android apps. Now, one IT professional actually said, "This site has helped me with 2 certifications and also as the supplemental material for my grad school classes. Give it a try. You won't be disappointed." Go to itpro.tv/enterprise and use code enterprise30 to receive 30% off all consumer subscriptions. That's itpro.tv/enterprise and use code enterprise30 for an additional 30% off the lifetime of your active subscription. IT Pro TV, build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey. And we thank IT Pro TV for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, it's time for the bites. And we're going to start with the bite with an interesting, we're going to have a good discussion here because we all read articles on the web, especially enterprise tech ones. Now, the question is here, have a large number of those contributed articles, those ones that have been contributed to, actually been written by advertisers? Do we know when they are? It's an important question here. I want to throw this to you guys first because you guys write a lot of articles. Curtis, I want to throw this to you first. Obviously, there is a lot of contributions that happen with articles today. How do you know? What do you do?
Well, for the responsible publishers, there is some sort of clear indication when a particular article has been contributed or comes through a collaboration with an advertiser. The place you have to be careful with are some, and these are frequently, but not always, smaller publishers who can really blur that line. And you have to be careful because, as an example, when Dark Reading, my former employer and still close set of colleagues, has someone from the industry, often someone from one of the major security vendors, write an article, it is shown as being contributed content, as opposed to the articles that are written with simply a byline from one of the Dark Reading editors or one of their freelancers. Often the contributed content is quite good, but knowing that it is contributed lets you know that it's coming from someone who professionally does have a specific point of view and may have a specific axe to grind. It doesn't have to be that they're hawking their product. A publication like Dark Reading won't let an article like that go through, but just that they have a particular point of view for what they're writing. Now, there's a third category of article, the advertorial, which should be even more clearly delineated. And at a site like a Dark Reading, other responsible professional sites, those will typically be in a separate area on the website. So it's very difficult for someone just to inadvertently stumble across them. The place where it's dangerous is when people come in, as most readers do, from Google. If you're just Googling a topic and articles come up and you see, oh, look, this is published on some responsible journal's website, some name that I know and have known since they were off doing print work, you can go, and it's not necessarily shown right at the top of the article what kind of article it is. So you do have to have a little bit of reader responsibility there. Now, all this is courtesy of the massive change that has happened during my career, where we've gone from the print world to the online world for most professional publications. If you want to talk about those publications still in print, whole different discussion, because they have a whole different set of ways to show what is advertorial, what's contributed, and what is commissioned. But for online, the number one thing to do is look at who's writing it and ask yourself, who's paying them the bulk of their money? If it is the publication, then you probably have a more even-handed source. If they're getting paid from a vendor in the space, it's likely that they have that vendor's interest in mind, no matter how well they write the article.
Right. Now, Chee, I want to throw this to you because obviously, when somebody writes an article, there used to be a workflow process that goes along with reviewing these things. What's the normal process? What used to be the process?
Well, some of the history on this is a lot of the reviews. I'm going to speak to reviews because that is actually the number one question that people ask me when we meet face-to-face or if they do a private conversation in Twitter or something like that. It's what used to happen? Why has the world changed so much? And the big issue is when I was at InfoWorld and before that, Internet Week, there was an attitude we called the separation of church and state. Shades of Padre, right? The reviewers were never allowed to talk to the salespeople, so that ad sales never, ever, ever affected a outcome of a review. Big deal. It was serious enough that for a little while we still had enough staffing, there was actually a peer review process, almost like an academic paper. And it was a really good thing. We actually caught some people sliding in some, shall we say, made up content. And the peer review process was other editors would read and look at the notes to try and figure out whether or not it was fair, even-handed, and whether or not the facts were done correctly. We always called it fact check. It was always done when I first got started, and it tried to make sure the articles were as even-handed as possible. Now, to put this a little bit in perspective, way back, I got a call from the Securities Exchange Commission, and they were calling to remind me that as a editor on what in those days was an international magazine, the writers were privy to some very, very long lead time non-disclosures. Actually, for a little while, I was being allowed to have a 1-year look at the roadmap at a certain division at Microsoft. So that put me into an interesting situation, and the SEC basically said, while it is not illegal for me to own tech stock, they will look at every trade I do under a microscope for potential insider information trading. So that was the old days. Now, keep in mind, a lot of the publications have changed radically. Back in the days of Internet Week and InfoWorld, they survived on ad sales. You would go and get a survey to determine how much influence you had over your corporation or organization's purchasing power, and we called those qualified readers. Sadly, such things really don't exist anymore. And as everything went online, the world changed, marketing changed to more how many clicks did you do? You have no idea how qualified that click was or how qualified that eyeball was, as we say in the biz. So ad sales changed. So let me get to the point. The number one question everybody asks is, what happened to all those really cool reviews? Why can't we have reviews again? And I should point out that a large-scale review, like Curt and I both participated on a very, very popular review at InfoWorld called Pimp Your Data Center, where Curt, Oliver, and myself built a best-of-breed data center from scratch. Now, that doesn't happen very often. And, it was great. People love it, and it's still getting millions of hits, even though the article's probably close to, 8, 9 years old now. So the world has changed. We can't sell ads the same way anymore. And for those people that keep asking me what happened to those reviews, my answer is simple. Nobody was buying ads to support those reviews. So this is actually more for the marketing folks. You folks shifted your spending, and you're now spending on online clicks. You stopped spending on the magazines that supported those reviews. So I will point my finger right at the marketing people saying, you missed the reviews? Well, the reason why you missed the reviews is you stopped funding them.
Right. Well, I want to throw this to Curt again, because we have a couple of questions. Ann was asking a good question in our back channel here, but there's also another question for you too, Curt, if you can go through both of them. One is, what I see a lot on the internet today, especially articles, is you'll see an organization, I'm not going to name names, but they'll basically do a rewrite of a particular topic, and they'll essentially reword the content of another article, and they'll attribute it, but it'll be way at the bottom, and you usually take them as a pretty good course of or news source, but then they'll kind of interject sometimes advertising or other things in there because they rename things that you don't normally look at, like they'll name an actual telecom company or something like that, and they'll kind of interject the advertising. How do you tell when you're reading those versus the real source, and should you be reading those versus the real source? And of course, we should answer Ann's question too. It's a pretty good one.
Sure. And let me say that both of the questions I'm going to deal with are part of what I'll call Media Consumption 101. Because one of the things that has changed since the time when, certainly I was a child, back then you tended to look at, because it was so expensive to produce a publication, they tended to be produced by reputable publishers. And so the editors of the publication were what we would call the gatekeepers. They made sure that what was published under their name, the thing that they were lending their credibility to, was vetted, was as accurate as they could be aware of, and would not sully their reputation. Today, it is essentially free to do an online publication. So you don't have that gatekeeping mechanism there. The gatekeeper is in the eyes and the mind of the reader. So with that in mind, to answer your question, Lou, when you see a publication that has one of these articles, like you mentioned, it's covering a particular topic, but it tends to go back on a particular company's products or services. Take a look at who's writing it and try to figure out who's paying them. Now, if this is at all reputable, it should be clearly noted. Are they a freelance writer? Are they someone who is professional in the industry? Are they someone who is with the company that's being talked about? Use that information to help guide your decision on how reputable, how honest, how reliable that information is going to be. Unfortunately, you can't simply read something, say, well, if it's on the internet, it must be truthful. You've got to do some of that vetting yourself. That applies both to the primary sources and something that our technical director, Ant, asked about. He mentioned specifically TechMeme. And, TechMeme is fine, but I'm going to use it as an example of a particular type of publication, and that's what I call an aggregator. If you look here, they are not typically writing their own work. They're pulling articles from other sites like Nikkei Asia, Reuters, other sources. Now, your local newspaper pulls from some of these sources like Reuters as well, so there's nothing inherently wrong with this. What it means, though, is that the aggregator has to depend on the rules of the sources it's pulling from. When that source is Reuters or, one of the Asian news services, no problem at all. And it looks, I've read TechMeme for a long time. Typically, they're very good about pulling from reputable sources. No issue there. Also note something that they did there that I like a lot and I consider important for a highly reliable source. They've got that just off centerpiece that is called sponsor post. It's in a separate background color. The sponsor's name is right at the top, and it's in a section called sponsor post. They clearly let you know what you're reading. To me, that's the key to this reliability issue. When I'm writing as a journalist, I have what I call an implied contract with my reader. And that is anything that I publish under my name, I'm going to make it as factual as I know how to make it. I'm going to make it as accurate as I know how to make it. And I'm going to make it as reasonable as I can. Notice that I didn't use two words. I didn't use objective because I'm a human being. Anything I write is going to be somewhat subjective. I didn't use truth. I use factual instead of truth because to me, truth is a philosophical concept. Facts are what journalists live and die by. So that's my take on how you should read. It's going to change a little bit more in the next 5 or 10 years. Ultimately, though, it comes down to you as the reader to be as careful as you can and think about who is writing the article that you're reading and who stands to benefit from you reading that article.
Right. Great advice. Great advice. Cheebert?
I want one last fast thing. For those of you out there, podcasts, written word, doesn't matter. You're calling yourself a journalist. I would very, very much like you to call out to you and say, make your testing plans open source. Once you publish, if you're comparing products, make your methodologies available publicly. One of the big things I used to do, and one of the reasons why I got involved with this whole review process, was I was applying scientific methodology to it. So whenever I wrote some large test plan using Spirent or Ixia or HP test gear or what have you, once the article was published, those test plans and those testing scripts became public domain because I wanted people to duplicate my work and to validate it. And if my methodologies were bad, to tell me about it so I could fix it. So I'm calling to the journalists out there, if you're comparing products, make your methodologies known.
Thank you guys. Some fantastic advice from you guys today. Well, folks, that does it for the bites. Next up, we have our guest to drop some knowledge on the TWiT. Right before we get to our guest, we do have to thank another sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Melissa. Now, have you ever forgotten to check that date on the carton of milk? Well, I know I have, and it's easy to store it away and forget about. And like milk, your customer data can also go bad, sometimes even faster than milk. And to put in perspective, up to 30% of customer data goes bad each and every year. Now think about your customer base. That's a lot of customers, right? That's why Melissa is there for you. Melissa makes sure your data is accurate and current so you reach the right customers. Now, their tools have helped businesses maintain fresh data for over 35 years. That's why over 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. Now, with a renewal rate of over 92%, companies love Melissa, and you will definitely too. Now, you can verify addresses, emails, phone numbers, and names in real time with Melissa. Melissa's global address verification service verifies addresses from over 240 countries and territories at the point of entry. You can validate existing customer data and find new customers. Tired of having duplicate customer information in your database? Well, with Melissa's data matching, you can eliminate clutter and duplicates, increase your accuracy of the database, and reduce postage and mailing costs as well. Get the information that completes your customer profiles better and more thoroughly. Add consumer demographic information to your records, such as social media handles. And Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, business size, or even budget. Now, with flexible on-premise web service, secure FTP processing, and software as a service delivery options, it can really help you. Now, Melissa also has their new Lookups app on iOS and Google to search addresses, names, and more right at your fingertips. And Melissa is continually undergoing independent security auditing to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. In fact, they're SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliant. Now, Melissa's Global Support Center also offers 24/7 world-renowned support if you sign up for a service level agreement. Inquire with them today. Now, Melissa is still supporting communities and qualifying essential workers during COVID-19. See if your organization qualifies for 6 months of free service by applying online at melissa.com. Make sure your customer contact data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in their API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. And we thank Melissa for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's my favorite part of the show. We actually get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the TWiT, right? And today we have Sam Lambert. He's Chief Product Officer at PlanetScale. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, our audiences, they love to hear people's origin stories. Can you maybe take us through a short journey through tech and where it brought you to PlanetScale?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got into tech about 13 years ago, and I started in a kind of traditional IT background. It was enjoyable, but I decided I wanted to get into more programming and creating and building things. And I got into a web tech firm, and I actually used to commute quite a way to that job. It was the first job I could find that would like take a bet on me, and I used to listen to TWiT while I was taking that trip. So it's nice to be here and kind of relive those memories. And I eventually got into databases. I was working on a large telemetry platform for an electric vehicle manufacturer, and we really got into like large scale MySQL deployments and gained a lot of experience using MySQL at scale. And after a while, I ended up seeing sort of a tweet from an employee at GitHub who was kind of bemoaning how difficult it was to find people with database expertise. And I reached out and we chatted, and I eventually took a job at GitHub, and I was their first database engineer hire. And I hung around at GitHub for 8 years inside the company and ended up becoming a VP of engineering. Absolutely loved my time there. It was a wonderful company to be at. And it taught me this real appreciation for developers, developer experience, and not just externally with our customers, but internally with our culture. The GitHub culture had no tolerance for slowing down. It was shipping, iterating, and building. And managing something like the database inside that company was challenging to begin with. Databases are often slow, painful, difficult to use, and we had to keep a very large website that the world depended on up. And it really taught me to balance shipping, speed, and innovation with stability at the data layer. And that took me on this journey, which was fantastic. And then I've ended up at PlanetScale, doing basically the same thing for our users, giving them, a great database that scales and with great developer experience.
Sam, you're speaking my language here. I love developer experience and I love databases. In fact, I used to work on databases quite a bit. They hold a special place in my heart. I used to work on software when software was just client and server, client and database, directly connecting to the databases, and they eventually had to re-architect them to be more 3-tier and be able to scale better. But that's the interesting question I want to throw back to you. What's some of the current modern issues that you're seeing organizations run into when it comes to databases?
I'm actually not sure it's modern. I think people are still running. I think people are running into age-old problems that still haven't been fixed. It's definitely around scalability. That's one thing that's always become very painful, and it's become easier and easier to scale other parts of the stack. And we've done, the tech industry has done amazing work getting us there. And I still think there's fundamental issues with databases that are stopping people scaling. One, though, is sharding. I think we're at sharding was previously the scale pattern for large enterprises. So Facebook, Google, Twitter, all of these big companies building very large websites were doing it on sharded MySQL. Famously Tau, the graph database that powers Facebook, is still backed by MySQL. But no one was able to create sharding environments without very large engineering teams, and lots of it was very hard work. And while scaling GitHub, we would always have this kind of back and forth of when will we ever get to be able to shard the data, with the very difficult orchestration problem that comes with sharding. And technology, sometimes tech just comes around because a lot of people think about it for a very long time, and the time becomes right. YouTube went to scale themselves, and they used MySQL, and they built Vitess. And Vitess was then open sourced. And now we're starting to see people really understand and see sharding as the way that they can scale. And so I think the newest, even though very old and being used by many people for a very long time, sharding is now starting to get into the hands of more people and become a scale pattern that's getting more familiar. There's a long way to go in terms of educating folks and showing them what's there, but I'm starting to see it come into more and more kind of environments that people are using, and that's really exciting. Not new, but it's certainly new in terms of timing.
Right. Now, you're seeing a lot now. Obviously, you talked a little about NoSQL databases, and you see a lot of these new NoSQL, especially like Azure has their kind of NoSQL alternatives, their CosmoDB, and they talk a lot about, they hound a lot about, hey, we auto scale, and we know we are able to do the sharding behind the scenes for you, and we have data consistency across regions and that kind of thing. So they're kind of hiding and encapsulating a lot of the complexity that goes along with this for organizations. But is that going to fix all the problems? Like what organization is still going to run into there?
Well, they do it without a relational model, which makes it very, very difficult to build applications on top. You end without a relational model for your database, it becomes messy. It's difficult to model that data. It's difficult to build applications, and many forms of app need that. And so that trade-off, although we sort of saw this scalability at the beginning of NoSQL with Mongo, and they certainly had better scalability stories, but with a massive trade-off in how you model the data and how you handle consistency. MySQL's been there for 25 years, chugging along with no issues with consistency, very quick, and is a relational database. And now it's the time that we combine the two. The dev experience, the ease of use, the scalability of NoSQL, and all of the fantastic things that MySQL brings to the table. It's sort of coming together. And it's great, right? There's some great NoSQL databases, but they don't all serve what users need. And the relational databases really started to lag, and we're beginning to see that catch up.
Right. I think I love modern-driven development. In fact, I worked on Dynamics and Power Apps for a long time as an engineer, and I can tell you that actually makes development a little bit more nice to do. I mean, it makes it more convenient to do. The developer experience is much better. And you can have things like no-code and low-code type solutions. What's some of the things that you guys are doing from like modern-driven development and making that dev experience better?
I think it's not. We're doing two things. It's a technical and a cultural set of problems for us, right? Culturally, we view the daily lives of the developer as in scope for how we think about our product. So we don't just think about the query path. It's extremely important. No one wants the query path to be unreliable or slow. So it's, reliability and scalability is extremely important to us. But we think about how the user interacts with the database and how they're productive. And that I feel is very new. The database has always been an end state, and there's kind of been the production database and no other up-to-date copies. And you end up building your software in isolation and pushing it to production, and then it interacts with the database. So we're doing a number of technical things to kind of make that better. So first of all is database branching. We believe you should get a branch of your database as simply and cheaply as you get a branch of your code base. And you should pair those things together. So when you open a pull request or you branch your code base, connect it to an isolated copy of your database and do your work there. Don't do it locally in a stale and unproduction-like environment. Do it next to your main database in our cloud solution, basically. Build your application, and then when schema changes being a very, very important part of software development. It's the number one thing we hear from our customers as being painful. And it is one of the reasons that the NoSQL movement became so successful, because they didn't put people through the burden of schema changes. And I was hearing for a long time people saying, I just wish I had the ease of NoSQL with all the best parts of a database with a schema. And so we're taking that very seriously, and we're giving people the ability to modify and deploy their schema like they deploy code. So you take a branch, you do your schema changes on that branch while you're developing your feature. And when it's time to push that feature to production, you just tell PlanetScale to deploy your schema. And we push that into production for you, fully online, without downtime, without data loss, without slowing down your application. And you've done it. You've deployed your database the same way you've deployed your code. And that's a completely new way of thinking about things and bringing the database into the software development lifecycle, not just tacking it onto the end.
Right. Well, lots more to talk about with Sam Lambert when we come back. In fact, maybe even get his thoughts on a lesser known fact about me. I'm the engineering owner of Microsoft Access, so I definitely know a lot about databases and how they've progressed over time. But I do want to bring my co-hosts back in when they come back as well. But before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Worldwide Technology and Intel. Now, WWT is at the forefront of innovation, working with clients all over the world to transform their businesses. Now, at the heart of WWT lies their Advanced Technology Center, or ATC. Now, the ATC is a research and testing lab that brings together technologies from leading OEMs. There's more than $500 million in equipment invested in that lab. In fact, the ATC offers hundreds of on-demand and schedulable labs featuring solutions that include technologies like Intel Xeon scalable processors, Intel Optane persistent memory, Optane SSDs, and others representing the newest advances in multi-cloud architecture, security, networking, primary and secondary storage, data analytics, and AI, DevOps, and so much more. Now, WWT's engineers and partners use the ATC to quickly spin up proofs of concept and pilots so customers can confidently select the best solutions. Now, this helps cut evaluation time from months to weeks. Now, with the ATC, you can test out products and solutions before you go to market, access technical articles, expert insights, demonstration videos, white papers, hands-on labs, and other tools that help you stay up to date with the latest technology. Not only is the ATC a physical lab space, but WWT has also virtualized it. Now, members of their ATC platform can access these amazing resources anywhere in the world, 365 days a year. Now, while exploring the ATC platform, make sure to check out WWT's events and communities for more opportunities to learn about technology trends and hear the latest research and insights from their experts. Now, whatever your business need, WWT can deliver scalable, tried and tested, tailored solutions. WWT brings strategy and execution together to make a new world happen. To learn more about WWT, the ATC, and gain access to all their free resources, visit wwt.com/twit and create an account on their ATC platform. That's wwt.com/twit. And we thank WWT and Intel for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we've been talking with Sam Lambert. He's Chief Product Officer at PlanetScale about databases and just the current state of the database world. Now, like I said, Sam, I am the engineering owner of Access, been for a while, and obviously Access is one of those, you can model-driven development. You go in and you build your models and you build your relationships, and it's more of a smaller scale type database application. People still use it, organizations still use it, education still uses it. Obviously, it's not that scalable because you got to share these types of things. But I do understand the fact that developers love that experience. They love that experience of being able to do things locally and then eventually go and deploy it to like a UAT environment, test it out, and then eventually deploy it to production. So that experience continues to be the norm for developers out there. What else are you seeing when it comes to? Obviously, you said schema changes is one of the big things. But what other things are some challenging things that people are seeing in normal database environments that you guys are doing better?
So I think it's largely around scale. You see these company journeys that companies go through. They start their business and they pick a database on day one that is going to solve the problems they have today, which is the iteration, speed of use, getting things going, because they've got an existential task, which is build a company, build something that users are going to like. And so thinking into the future, thinking about scalability and thinking about when you have millions or tens of millions of users is too early. So you pick something fast and easy to use that has the best dev tools. And then you start building and you get successful. And that's something we hope for all of our users. You become very, very successful. And then all of those trade-offs you made start to become bad decisions. And in hindsight, you probably wouldn't change them. But if you think about this, the database is starting to go down. It's starting to get slow. You're having user issues. And we saw this at GitHub. We delighted our users, a company famous for being out there, building things in public and showing and quickly iterating. And then we ran into database scalability problems. And we spent years and years solving these problems. And our users just don't care, right? Like it's not value to them. They expect the website to be up. So you spend millions and millions and millions of dollars solving database problems just to keep going. And I believe it hurts the growth curve of every single company. The back end needs to be rewritten or changed or scaled, and it's undifferentiated. The difference with PlanetScale is that we are the best choice for day one. It is the easiest database to set up. We provision you a database in seconds. When I started doing this, I would go on other cloud databases, and it would be 30 minutes to get a database. And if you have the next Stripe in your head, all you want to do is put it out into the world. And you're not going to wait around for things. So we believe in speed, ease of access. So databases and branches are all instant to create. We have a CLI that means you can automate all of the interactions you have with your database. You can push schema changes continually. One of our engineers was saying the other day, they wish they had more schema changes to do because we just make it so simple, like deploying code, right? So you get into that fast iteration loop you want on day one, and it's built on top of a technology that scales. For test, the underlying technology that PlanetScale is built on, powered YouTube, one of the largest websites on the internet. It's in production at companies like Square, JD.com, Slack. 100% of Slack's messages are stored in Vitesse. So that trade-off between super scalable for hyperscale and the best database today to use on day one. There's never been a company before that's produced a database that can do both, and that is something that we're extremely excited about. Usually, the best database for day one is never the database for scale, and we hope that you will choose to use PlanetScale for the creation of your company, and we will still be with you when you are ringing the bell at the stock exchange.
Right. Fantastic. Well, I do want to bring my co-host back in because they've been chomping at the bit here behind the scenes. Curtis, I want to throw it to you first.
Well, I've got a question. It seems like in the past 5 to 10 years, we've really seen a proliferation in the types of databases out there. For the longest time, it was assumed that everyone was going to use a relational database and that was it. But now we're seeing everything relational, non-relational, serverless. We're seeing in-memory, things like SAP's HANA. We're seeing object-oriented, just all kinds of things. Each one picking some use case and saying we're obviously the best. Why do you think that there's been such an interest in coming up with a truly optimal database type. And, from where you sit, now obviously you've got something of an axe to grind here, but from where you sit, is there one type of database that's best for every instant, or are we in a world where your use case is really going to dictate what kind of database you end up deploying?
So yeah, it really depends. There are many, many niche databases for many, many niche use cases. I think the problem with those is that they are niche, right? You have smaller communities, you have less adoption, you have less support in terms of languages, and you just, you don't have many people finding issues. The smaller and the less used the database you use is, the more likely you are to be the first person that's going to run into something problematic. And with a database, you don't really want to do that. There are major and widely adopted databases like MySQL, Postgres, Mongo that have been around for a long time. And MySQL specifically has been around for 25 years now. And I think once you get into a large scale, it then breaks down even further. So we see, and it's widely known that MySQL or many like stable relational databases back data stores that are massive, and they reduce MySQL to kind of the data store itself. So Tau, again, I'll use that as the example from Facebook. It's a graph database. So there are graph databases out there, and they're small and they're small scale, and you would take a lot to bring them up to a very large scale. So MySQL is then being used again for something different with a different layer on top, and that's something we see at a lot of companies. They need a data store, a storage engine that's very reliable and is quick and resilient and does what it needs to do, and they build the additional logic on top to create that separation.
Well, you've made a very good case about PlanetScale's products being applicable across a wide variety of use cases. And I guess my question is, you mentioned some of these other types of databases that basically have such an incredible overhead that you really need to have some sort of massive commercial scale database project before it's worthwhile even beginning an instance, which makes it difficult to learn those databases outside of an academic or enterprise environment. With yours, are we talking about something where someone who had some experience with other databases could build, we'll call it a trivial database, gain some experience and really do some self-learning to get themselves into the technology?
Oh, absolutely. That is our goal. Our goal is to take a tool used by the hyperscalers and bring it so that on day one of your journey, even as a developer, it's there for you and it's approachable. And that's something that's extremely important to us. We don't believe in having these big kind of cliffs to climb when it comes to learning. And we want to make sure that on day one, we help you be successful immediately. And that's why it presents as a MySQL database, a relational database. There are many, many tutorials on learning SQL. It's a language that, I've seen now SQL is being built into so many other projects as a way of extracting data, whether it's analytics, whether it's even on audit log systems now, you see that they give you a SQL interface because it is just a really simple and great language to use. We do the same. You use SQL to extract your data from highly sharded environments that can run across, we see deployments of 10, 20,000 servers. It presents us one database. We have customers with tens of thousands of servers, and their application thinks they are talking to a single database. That simplicity is great for everybody, and it means on day one of your journey, you connect it to your Rails application, and your Rails application just feels it could be talking to just a locally installed MySQL or Postgres that's running on your machine.
Sam, I'm going to ask a question from the research academic world. I did a lot of work with physical oceanographers, and we live and die by time series data. But the problem is a lot of databases really and truly don't like time series data because, either the data rate or the data type or whatevers. I would love to have a more flexible tool for things like hydrophone data or things like that. What do you say? If I was an academic or a small business, where should I go and take a look and learn your tool?
So time series is not something I would say we specialize at. And our tool is very much optimized for being your main source of truth database with a relational model. Time series is not something we make super easy. And there are specialized time series databases out there. And it is a very, very difficult problem to solve. I've seen it at other companies. Trying to scale a time series database is very, very tough. We've made trade-offs that make storing the type of data that we store easy and optimal, but time series is not something we have optimized for specifically.
Well, let's shift the question then. Say we do have an application that is appropriate, and we're a relatively small organization trying to get started. Where can they go? What can they do? How do they get started with your system? And how do they get started asking the questions to make sure they're appropriate?
Oh, absolutely. So if you go to PlanetScale.com, we have a documentation section. We aim to make our docs, a core part of the product and beautiful, so people can go there and check it out. They can download our CLI and create an account and get building, and they can do all of that from PlanetScale.com.
Thank you. Sorry, my physical oceanographer hat was showing. I always ask that question.
Phenomenal. That sounds so fun to do.
Yeah, you can go and listen to Whales live at aloha.manoa.hawaii.edu/ACO if you want to listen to Whales right now. Anyway, thanks for being on the show. I'm going to hand you back to Lou, and we'll see what's happening next.
That's right. Thanks, Chee. Well, fortunately, all good things have to come to an end. Sam, thanks so much for being here. We're running a little bit low on time, but maybe you could tell the folks at home where they can go to learn more about PlanetScale and maybe get started.
PlanetScale.com and PlanetScale Data on Twitter. And thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another hour of the best selling enterprise podcast in the universe. So definitely tune your podcatcher to TWiT. But before we sign out, we do want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my co-host, starting with our arrow, Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, we have a very special day today. Maybe happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Want to do anything special for your birthday?
I don't know. I got told I need to dress nicely tonight.
Uh-oh.
So we'll see what happens. This is actually the big 6-0, so we shall see what happens. Yeah, I'm an old fart. For Sam's edification, the first database I learned was Database on the IBM 370.
Wow, that definitely predates me.
Yeah, imagine doing database work on card punches.
Well, funny enough, actually, I used to work for a company that made clocking machines and was going through the transformation of making them digital, and we had to use an access database, so it all kind of rolls together. It was access control and an access database. And back then, when it got corrupted, there was one person who actually worked in the basement that knew how to uncorrupt the database, and I had to drudge down the stairs and disturb him. And it was almost like from a movie. I had to go and say, we've corrupted the access database again. Can you please save us?
Yeah,
I help kids.
Yeah, I helped write
database work with ISAM and VSAM on 360s using punch cards. You don't know how good you've got it.
Yeah, and we still build ISAM interfaces, Curtis.
Yeah.
Hey, they work.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. They do.
What's really funny is the original touch tone and web registration system at the University of Hawaii was using attachmate tools with Microsoft Access to screen scrape 3270 sessions.
See, everyone's used Access at some point in their lives, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you, Chee. Curtis, I want to throw it to you first. Thank you. Second, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell the folks at home where can people find you and all of your work?
Well, as always, you can find me on Twitter at KG4GWA. I'm going to be talking a lot about my conference presentations. Going to have some sign up for not only the Omdia Analyst Summit at Black Hat, but I've got a couple of webinars coming up. Those are going to be free, so I'll have the sign up for those where we're talking about how to get people to stop being such vulnerabilities in your overall cybersecurity scheme. So lots of good stuff happening. Please follow me. And if you've got any questions, hit me up with a direct message there on Twitter at KG4GWA.
Thank you, Curtis. Thank you guys for being here. We couldn't do the show without you. Well, we also have to thank you as well. You, the person who drops in each and every week to get your enterprise and IT news. And we want to make it easy for you to get that IT news and enterprise goodness. Go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiT. There you'll find all the amazing back episodes, the show notes, the co-host information, and the links that we do during the show. But if more importantly, you'll also get those helpful subscribe and download links right next to those videos there. Support the show by getting your audio version, your video version of your choice. Listen on any one of your devices or any one of your podcast applications, because we're on all of them. So definitely subscribe and support the show. Plus, you may have heard Club TWiT. That is right. It's a members-only ad-free podcast service with a bonus TWiT Plus feed that you can't get anywhere else. That's right. It's only $7 per month. And one of my favorite things that comes along with Club TWiT is the exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. A little fun stuff that's going on behind the scenes there. Some great discussions, some great topics, and of course, some great community and fun. Some really interesting conversations. So go join right now, Club TWiT, at twit.tv/club. TWiT. Now, after you subscribe, you can impress your friends, your family members, maybe even your coworkers with the gift of TWiT, because we talk about a lot of great tech topics on the show, and I definitely guarantee they will find it fun and interesting as well. So definitely share with them and subscribe. Now, if you haven't subscribed or you have subscribed, once you've done that, we also do the show live, 1:30 p.m. Pacific, Fridays at live.twit.tv. Come see how the show is made. Come see how the pizza's made. Come see the behind the scenes, all the fun stuff, all the banter that we do before and after the show. So definitely join the live stream at live.twit.tv. And of course, we also have our great chat room as well as part of our live experience at irc.twit.tv. We have some great reoccurring characters, some new people that come in there. Some great topics, some great discussions, and just keeps the show moving and really has some really great stuff that we talk about in there. So definitely join the chat room, irc.twit.tv. Of course, hop over to Twitter right now. You can also follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. There I post all the latest and greatest enterprise tidbits. I also have some great conversations with you as well. Plus, you can also see what I do during my normal work week at Microsoft. And in fact, if you want to check out more about that, you go to developers.microsoft.com/office. See the latest, greatest ways to customize your Office experience and make it more easy, more productive for you. Definitely check out Office Scripts. It's the newest way to create macros on your online Excel experience. Well, folks, I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week. We couldn't do the show without them, so thank you for all their support over the years. I also thank all the engineers at TWiT. Of course, they do a lot of things behind the scene. We just can't see them, but you know what? They are what makes this show possible. And I also want to thank Mr. Brian Chee one more time. Cheebert is not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer. And he does all the show bookings and the plannings for the show. And we really couldn't do this show without him. So thank you, Cheebert, for all your support. Now, before we sign out, we have to thank our editor behind the scenes, Kevin. Kevin, thank you so much for making us look good after the fact. So appreciate all your support. Of course, our TD for today, Mr. Ant Pruitt, the famous and talented Mr. Ant Pruitt. Ant, tell us what's going on in TWiT this week and what can we look forward to on your content?
Well, Mr. Lou, this week I talked about how to rescue a photo because you know what? I don't care how long you've been shooting photography, you're going to screw up. You're going to have some things that's just, you didn't see it there when you clicked that shutter. So I said, you know what, let's talk about rescuing those photos and doing the best we can to bring them back to life. Hands-on photography, twit.tv/hop.
I love that one. I'm going to have to check that one out because I definitely have some really bad photos that could be really great photos. So I'll have to check it out. Thank you, Ian. And until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep TWiT.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, and I want to tell you about my show, Hands on Photography, here on TWiT TV. Each and every week, Thursday that is, I like to sit down and share with you the best tips and tricks that are going to help make you a better photographer. And it's not always about Photoshop. It's not always about just having the biggest and baddest and bestest camera. It can be the simplest of things, like leave your eye open when you're looking through the viewfinder. All of these simple tips can really help step your photography game up. So subscribe to the show today. That's twit.tv/hop. And I look forward to talking to you soon.